Welcome everyone to our regular Sunday morning Ramana Satsang. And today, the second Sunday of each month, Michael James joins us from, I'm not sure where you're at, Michael, England or Scotland or
Scotland, Scotland,
someplace. Sounds
Scotland, someplace,
interesting.
someplace.
Someplace that really doesn't exist anyhow, but it's there.
Yeah, yeah.
So, um, we had the first question comes from Mark. Is Mark here? I don't see him anyhow.
Oh, no, 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 that's not the first one. There are three new ones, but Melissa sent me. So I think we should
Oh,
start with those. Mark is the first of the old group from the
okay.
previous time.
This is from David Sillier. David, would you like to go ahead and read your question?
I would like to extend the discussion we began last month on non-dual consciousness. In Upadasa the complete version in 4 languages composed by Sri Bhagavan, on page 79, it says, abiding permanently or firmly in this state of true self-knowledge as parasupta, supreme or transcendent happiness, which is devoid of both bondage and liberation, is abiding as God has commanded, or abiding in the service of God. And then he clarifies, he says, when we imagine ourself to be a finite individual, we are doing a great disservice to God, because we are thereby making it necessary for him to draw us back into himself. Therefore, so long as we imagine ourselves to be separate from him, nothing we do is true service to him. The only service he requires of us is to surrender ourselves entirely to his will, which is remaining as one with himself. Therefore, surrendering our finite self by abiding as our essential non-dual self-conscious being, which is both the thought-free state of supreme happiness and the absolute reality that we call God, is truly abiding in his service. And I would appreciate our entire group discussing that with you, Michael, and thank you.
Okay. One clarification. Um, the 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 first part you read, that is a translation of a verse. You then say Bhagavan clarifies that it was not. That's not actually Bhagavan's clarification. That is because I did the translation, and that's part of my explanation. So it's not actually Bhagavan's clarification. I'm explaining the idea expressed here, but I can give a bit more context to this. This is the second last verse of Upadesha Undya or Upadesha Saram. Bhagavan began talking about karma, saying karma cannot give liberation, but if karma is done without desire for the fruit, but just done for the love of God, it will purify the mind and show the way to liberation. In other words, he's taking this is the path of nishkamya karma, the desireless action, which he takes to be the preliminary stages of the path of bhakti, the path of devotion. So he then talks about the nishkamya karmas we can do, the puja, which is action of the body, japa, which is action of speech, and dhyana, or meditation, which is action of mind. And each of these is more efficacious than the previous one. That is, better than the actions we do by body is the actions we do by speech. Better than the actions we do by speech is actions we do by mind. The reason for this is we can be doing outward forms of worship with our mind wandering here and there. Many people, they go to temples or churches or mosques or synagogues or whatever, and they go there to pray for something. But while whatever rituals are going on there, their mind will be wandering about all their worldly problems. So it's very much easier to miss when the mind is going away, when the worship we're doing is physical. When we're doing japa, that is by speech, a little bit more, it becomes a little easier to notice when our mind wanders. But you can still do japa. You can be repeating a name of God or repeating a prayer while your mind is wandering. But when you're meditating, you more easily detect when the mind wanders away, because so that's why Bhagavan says, better than the puja is the japa, better than the japa is the dhyana, the meditation. So he's talking there about these practices of devotion. But then he goes on to say, rather than meditating on God as something other than oneself, meditating on him as not other than oneself, with the understanding that he is I, that is the best among all. When he says each is better than the previous one, and this is best among all, what he means by best is it's more efficacious in purifying the mind. So actions can purify the mind. They cannot bring about the destruction of mind. Only when we, instead of meditating on God as something other than ourselves, when we meditate on him as not other than ourselves, that is, meditate on I alone, that is not an action. That is, thinking of anything other than ourselves is a mental activity, but attending to ourself is a cessation of mental activity, because to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, we thereby subside. And when we subside, our mental activity subsides along with us. So that, as he indicates in the next verse, verse 9, by the strength of self-attentiveness, we remain in the state of being, which is our real state, and that is supreme devotion. Then he goes on to talk about the practice of yoga, the pranayama, the breath control, as a means to restrain the mind. And he points out that by breath restraint, all you can do is to bring about a temporary dissolution of mind, not permanent dissolution. Permanent dissolution is brought about only when we direct our mind back within to know who am I. I'm paraphrasing, but this is the gist of it. Then he talks about the path of jnana, the path of self-investigation. So he's covering all the four yogas here. So this verse 29 comes towards the end. So in a certain sense, he's recapping most of the bhakti traditions talk about service to God. They have different ideas of what is service to God, but usually service to God means worshipping in temples or doing rituals and everything. This is service to God. The Sanskrit word for service is seva, which means both worship and service. So it's service in the sense of worship. One bhakti tradition that is very prevalent in Tamil Nadu, in South India, where Bhagavan resided, is Shaiva Siddhanta. And the term they have in Shaiva Siddhanta for being in the service of God is irepani nitral, which literally means standing in the service of God or abiding in the service of God. So this is the term he uses here. But he said, what is the real service of God? It's not all these external rituals. It is being in this state of supreme bliss which transcends bondage and liberation. When he says this state, he's referring to the previous verse in which he says, when one knows what the real nature of oneself is, then beginningless, infinite, unbroken Satchidananda. The implication is, when we know what we actually are, what will remain is only this beginningless, endless, infinite, unbroken Satchidananda, being, awareness, happiness. So, in other words, what we actually are is only that that infinite Satchidananda, and that alone is what will remain when we know ourselves as we actually are. So that's in verse 28. So in verse 29, he says, standing in this state, standing means being in this state, whereby one experiences supreme happiness, because it's a state of Satchidananda. So being in Satchidananda is experiencing supreme happiness, and it's devoid of bondage and liberation. That is service of God. So why is it service of God? That is what I was trying to explain in that note. Sadhu Om put it very nicely. He said, the greatest service we can do to God is not giving trouble to God. If we rise as ego, God has to come and save us. And the analogy he said for this is, supposing a child, this isn't exactly how he said it, but this is a general idea. Supposing a child asks the mother, "Mummy, what can I do to help you?" And the mother's cooking or something. Mother says, "Just sit quiet and I'll get on with the cooking. Sitting quiet is the best help you can do for me." But if the child, being a small child, he or she is restless, so they decide to go running out of the house. They run out into the street. As soon as the child runs out in the street, the mother has to leave what she's doing. She has to run after the child and bring it back. And that actually is one of the words in Sanskrit, terms in Sanskrit for grace, divine grace, is anugraha. Graha means to grasp. Anu means what comes after. So the idea of anugraha, God has to come after us to grasp us, to save us from the trouble we get ourselves in by rising as ego. So what Bhagavan is saying here, God doesn't need any service from us. We don't need to do anything to serve God. If we just subside and remain as we actually are, that's the best service we can do to God, for God, because we're not giving him any trouble by rising his ego and making it necessary for him to come out after us. That is the idea in this verse. So what Bhagavan is saying is, what is true service of God? All the bhakti traditions, they talk about service of God, and there are many bhakti traditions, particularly within Vedanta, but they will even say, we don't even want moksha, we don't want liberation, because wanting liberation is selfish. That's their interpretation. Of course, it's not, but that's their understanding, because liberation is for me, so that's selfish. I don't want anything. I just want to serve God. I want to serve Krishna or whatever. And that is their whole practice and philosophy is based on this idea. But the highest state is just to be eternally in the service of God. You go to the Vaikuntha or Goloka, the heavenly world of God, whatever world God resides in, depending if you're generally for Vaishnavas, Vaikuntha is the heaven. That's where Vishnu resides. Or if you're particularly a Krishna Bhakta, they call it Goloka. That's the world of Krishna. Or if you're a Shaivite, it's Kailasa. So there's this idea that there are different types of heavens in Hinduism. There's ordinary heaven, where you just go for experiencing the fruits of your karmas. If you do good karmas, you go to Swarga. That's heaven in a general sense. But Kailasa, Vaikuntha, Goloka, these are particularly the abodes of God. So for devotees, they're not going to experience the fruits of their good actions. They're going there just to practice devotion to God. So their idea is that they will be eternally in God's world serving God. That's their idea. But Bhagavan is saying, what is the true service of God? It is just to be as we actually are. So what we actually are is that Satchidananda. So if we remain in this state of just being, that is experiencing supreme happiness. And he also says he says bandha vidatra, that is, it's devoid of bondage and liberation. Why is it devoid of bondage and liberation? If bondage is true, then liberation is necessary. But when we follow this path that Bhagavan has taught us, bondage is for whom? Bondage is only for ego. When we investigate ourselves and find out that ego is ever non-existent, then there never was any bondage and therefore never is any liberation. Bhagavan expresses this idea in verse 39 of Uludunapadu. What he says there is, the meaning is, only so long as one says, I am someone bound. When he says, it means so long as one is aware of oneself as someone who is bound, there'll be thoughts of liberation. There'll be thoughts of bondage and liberation. When one looks at oneself to know who is the one who is bound, and when oneself, who is eternally liberated, alone remains as accomplished, the thought of bondage will not remain. Therefore, will there be any thought of liberation? He puts it in a very compact way, but if we unpack it a little, if we look at ourselves, that is, if we investigate ourselves to see what we who now feel that we're in bondage, we're bound by so many limitations. We mistake ourselves with the body, and thereby we've imposed so many limitations upon ourselves. So this is bondage. So if we look at ourselves to find out who is this I who is aware of itself as being in bondage, we will thereby find what we actually are. We are the eternally liberated. What we actually are is eternally liberated. There never was any such thing as bondage because we never did actually rise the ego. Ego is we seem to be ego only when we're attending to things other than ourselves. If we attend to ourselves, there's no such thing as ego to be found. So in the absence of ego, for whom is bondage? There's no one. If there's no ego, there's no one in bondage. And if there's no bondage, therefore there's no liberation. So ultimately, so long as we seem to be in bondage, it's right to seek liberation. But when we actually know what we actually are, we will find out that we were never in bondage and are therefore eternally liberated. So we go beyond this duality of bondage and liberation. That's why in this verse 29 of Upadeshundya, he says, being in this state, which is devoid of bondage and liberation, and which is therefore experiencing supreme happiness, that is truly being in the service of God. So we don't need to do anything to serve God. We need to just subside and be as we actually are. Because being in that state, to put it in the terms of bhakti tradition, is surrendering ourselves to God, giving ourselves to God. That is, when we as ego subside, we are surrendering ourselves to God. That is the greatest service we can do to God. So that is the idea in this verse. Is that clear, or do you have any questions about my explanation?
Well, I think your entire discussion is helpful, but especially the last, I think, sentence that you said, that when we abide in this state, we are in service to God.
Yeah.
We are with God, in service to God. That is in a sense, who we are. And we're undoing the obfuscation, for lack of a better term at this moment, for the unreality of things. Yeah. So for me, thank you. I think there's maybe other people. Melissa has a question, and some other people, but thank you so much.
Yeah. But one more thing I'll say, you were connecting this with non-dual consciousness. What is non-dual consciousness? Consciousness or awareness of anything other than ourselves, there's a duality there. There's a subject and an object. In
Right.
non-dual consciousness, there's no object and therefore no subject. It's just pure consciousness, pure awareness. That is the non-dual consciousness. That is what we experience when we cease to rise as ego and remain in this state of Satchitananda. So that is, it's not that we are serving God, but we're not serving God as if God is another, because Bhagavan
Right.
already clarified
That's
a few
true.
verses earlier.
Absolutely.
God
Yeah.
is our own very being. So
Yes.
truly being in service of God is just being God, not separating ourselves and thereby creating problems for ourselves and for God.
Yes, the reason why I asked the question was because there's a certain point which I think you expressed well throughout, but particularly the last part, that to abide in God is serving God.
Exactly.
It's not serving something separate at all.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I appreciate the discussion, and I think there's other people who have maybe some comments, but thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, Sri Ram had his hand up too.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael, very much. Beautiful explanation. I have a question about, you stated that moksha is not a selfish state. And I've read Bhagavan's writing somewhere that the greatest service one can do to humanity is to be in the natural state of as we are.
Yes.
But there is a Buddhist teaching in Bodhisattvas that the Bodhisattva will not be satisfied until all jivas have achieved that state of oneness with Brahman. Is there how do you can we reconcile those two, or what's the difference?
We can, that is, there are so many different religious beliefs. In every religion, there are different levels of belief. Because as Bhagavan said, when Swami Yogananda, who wrote Autobiography of a Yogi, when he came to Bhagavan, he asked him, what teaching should be given for the uplift of the masses? Bhagavan says, teaching cannot be given en masse. Teaching must be according to the taught. So different teachings are appropriate to people at different levels of understanding. That is, we're going through, over the course of many lives, we go through a gradual process of purification and maturing. So if we teach these, that is what Bhagavan has taught us, this is the ultimate teaching, the deepest teachings of all. But if we teach this, the majority of people won't be attracted by this at all. So that it has to be, something has to be given that will appeal to them. That's where all these dualistic teachings, they serve a purpose, because so long as people are following a dualistic form of devotion, that's a means to purify the mind. When the mind is purified, it's clarified. And then they come to understand, then the clarity will dawn when the mind is purified. But if God is something, so long as I take God to be something separate from me, I'm limiting God. Because if God is infinite, nothing can be other than God. If something is other than God, then God is a limited God. Because then you've got God and not God. So that you've got a limitation on God. So if God is truly infinite, as all the religions say he is, how can he be separate? So that clarity comes. God is not something other than myself. God is my own very being. So to surrender myself to God means to subside back into my being and just be as I actually am. So that clarity comes by all these, in a very gradual way, over the course of many lives, by all this dualistic devotion. This bodhisattva idea is a sort of Buddhist equivalent of these more diluted teachings. That is, I don't, well, maybe in some Mahayana texts they attribute these teachings to Buddha, but in the earliest texts, the Pali Canon, there's no mention of bodhisattva. What Buddha taught is about suffering and the means to put an end to suffering. You put an end to suffering only when in the state of nirvana. Nirvana means the state in which you're extinguished. So, but in later Buddhism, because once that is when you give high teachings, people are not all ready for the high teachings, so they'll dilute it in their own way. So this is how all religions develop. They develop so many, I mean, every religion has its own particular beliefs, but they're usually the beliefs that are prevalent in a religion are usually far removed from what the original founder or founders of that religion taught. It's more diluted, but it's appropriate for, I mean, it suits the needs of people. And it's a very indirect way of going to the ultimate teachings. So in Buddhism, they have this idea of bodhisattva, but instead of, but if I attain liberation for myself, that's selfish. So I should remain as a bodhisattva. I should remain as a very pure soul to help the uplift of others. And only when all others are liberated, then only I will be liberated. That's the idea. But that's like a blind man who is offered sight. If you're given sight, you can then help the other blind people. But if you say, no, it'd be selfish to have to accept sight for myself, so I will remain blind and I will lead the other blind people to salvation. It's meaningless. That the only one who is able to see will be able to help the blind people. So that liberation is that state of seeing clearly what is real. Regarding this idea that liberation is selfish, this is because of a complete misunderstanding of what is liberation. If you have the idea that an individual is liberated, then you can say, okay, yeah, that's selfish. But that is not what liberation is. Liberation is not liberation of the individual. It's liberation from the individual. It's not ego who's going to attain liberation. The destruction of ego is liberation, as Bhagavan says in the final verse of Ulladu. That is, there are many different ideas. I mean, generally, everyone talks about liberation, but there are so many different ideas about liberation. Some people believe that in the state of liberation, you retain your individuality, so you still have a form. Some people say, no, liberation is a formless state. Some people say, no, if you're liberated, you can have a form and you can be without a form. All these are assuming some sort of individuality remaining. So what Bhagavan says is, in verse 40, the final verse of Ulladu, after the previous verse when he talked about the state beyond bondage and liberation, in verse 40 he says, if it is said that the liberation that one will experience is of three kinds, with form, without form, or with or without form, that is a choice, either with or without. You can choose. You can sometimes be with form, sometimes be without form. If it is said thus, I will say, the ego form, which distinguishes liberation with form, without form, or without form, being destroyed alone is liberation. So if we understand that liberation is the destruction of ego, then how can we say it's selfish? It's the very opposite of selfishness. It's a state of complete um, self abnegation or whatever, a complete denial of self, complete surrender of self. But because people don't have such a deep understanding, they think, oh, if you get liberated, you've got liberated, but the others haven't got liberated. That's selfish, isn't it? Because it's because of an unrefined understanding of what liberation actually is.
So that's beautiful. Can you add a couple of words as to why Bhagavan said that the greatest service you can do to humanity is to liberate, to be free?
If you're having a dream, and in your dream you see so many, you see wars, you see famines, you see pandemics, all sorts of sufferings you're seeing in your dream. What should you do? If you can start raising money to do famine relief. You can campaign for a government that will strike a peace deal with the enemy. You can try to do so many things, but whatever you do, it's an imperfect solution. Even if you raise money and you are able to do famine relief, how long is it going to last? Because it's all just a dream. The greatest good you can do to all the people in your dream is simply to wake up. Then all the troubles you see in the dream come to an end. So that's the deepest explanation. All this is just a dream. All these troubles we see in the world, all the suffering we see in the world, all this appears because we are dreaming. If we wake up from this dream, all the suffering will come to an end. That's the deepest teaching. We can explain it at other levels. The whole world is being taken care of by God. God knows what is best. So the best thing we can do is to surrender ourselves to God and let God take care of the world in whatever way He sees fit. If there's suffering in the world, if there's wars and pandemics and famines and all sorts of things, none of these things can happen without God's consent. God is allowing people to reap the fruit of their own karmas. So it all has a purpose. So we surrender to God. So we can explain it in that way also. Like for many of that is within Vedanta, even within Bhagavan's teachings, we can see different levels of explanation. The different levels of explanation are appropriate depending on the perspective of the person who is asking the question and seeking an explanation. The deepest explanations are not suitable for those who are not ready to accept them. So modified explanations have to be given. Is that a clear answer?
Yes, Michael, it's clear. Thank you very much.
Right.
Okay, Melissa, come on in.
Yes. So this discussion brings up for me again a very, very basic question. I know it's been answered many times, but I would like to hear it again. It's clear that we're seeking the subsiding or annihilation or destruction of ego so that we can fully know ourselves as we really are, which means that we will experience ourselves as we really are. But it is ego that projects all experiences. So how can it be that when we annihilate ego, we will experience what we really are? again, as an illustration, in deep sleep, there is no experience. We only recognize that we were in deep sleep after we wake up, when the ego is again able to see, perceive that we were in sleep. And we might have some lingering recollection, a vague recollection, but it's only after we are in the waking state. So that conundrum, if you could please address it.
I'll deal with it in two parts. Firstly, about experiencing. That is, when we use language, we need to, there's no words that are adequate for expressing the teachings of non-duality. So we are forced to use the language of duality. So sometimes the state of self-knowledge, Atma-vichara, or which is just a state of pure self-awareness, is described as Atmanubhava, the experience of oneself. However, this is completely different to any other type of experience. That is, what ego is experiencing is a subject-object experience, an experience that entails subject and object. Ego is always the subject. Whatever it experiences, the object. This is what is often referred to in Vedanta philosophy. There is a triputi. Triputi means there are three things involved there. There's the subject, the object, and the means by which the subject knows the object. So, for example, there's a computer screen in front of me. How do I know there's a computer screen in front of me? Because I see it. So seeing is the means by which I know that there's a computer screen in front of me. The computer screen is the object, I am the subject, and the means by which I know it is seeing. So there are so many means of knowing. We know by seeing, by hearing, and so on. We know by hearsay. We many things we learn in school. We learn history and geography and science and all these things. But we're not actually having. We don't have. We don't conduct all the experiments to find out, to rediscover science all again. We take a lot of it on trust. We accept that scientists have experimented all these things, they verified these things and everything. So we take a lot of things on trust. When we learn about history, for example, when we're at school, we may take everything that's written in the history book to be gospel truth. Because it's in the history book, it must be true. And such a date, there was such and such battle, and there were two sides, and this side won. And but when we grow up, we come to know the history books are usually written by the ones who win the battle, not by ones who lose the battles. So history, the evidence for the historical events is often very one-sided. So we can't take everything we learn about history to be correct. So we have to investigate it more. So there's so many ways by which we seek to know things other than ourselves, by science, by research. In the case of history, you research historical documents, you research archaeology, so many things. Or nowadays they use DNA also for historical research. So there's so many ways in which we seek to know things. So we're always seeking to know things other than ourselves, and we have so many means by which we come to know things. But this is all dualistic knowledge. There's a knower and something known. In the case of self-knowledge, there are not two things. That's why Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Upadesha, being oneself alone is knowing oneself, because oneself is not two. There's not an I that knows and an I that is known. There's only one I. So how do we know ourselves? Because what we actually are is pure consciousness, pure awareness. The nature of awareness is always to be aware of itself. We can't be aware without being aware, but we're aware. And we can't be aware, but we're aware without being aware, but we are. So the most fundamental form of awareness is the awareness I am, the awareness of our own being. That is an experience, but it's not an experience in the same sense of the knowing things other than ourselves. That's why Bhagavan talked about two types of knowledge or awareness, what he called Sutarivu and Sutatrarivu. Sutu means to show in the sense of to point out. So Sutukatu, if you point out, there's the moon, there's the crescent moon just above that palm tree there. That is what is meant by Sutu, it's pointing out. So Sutaribu, the awareness that is showing, that is the objective awareness. Awareness that knows objects. Whereas Sutatraribu, the awareness that is devoid of any such thing, that is the pure awareness. Awareness that is just that is aware of nothing other than itself. Usually I translate these terms as transitive awareness, intransitive awareness. Transitive, because a transitive verb is a verb that takes an object. An intransitive verb is a verb that doesn't take an object. So applying that to this, transitive awareness is an object-knowing awareness. Intransitive awareness is the awareness that is just aware without being aware of anything. That is the pure awareness. So that pure awareness is an experience, not an experience in the same sense of awareness of other things, but it is an experience. So that's the first part of the explanation. Regarding sleep, our knowledge of our existence in sleep is not a mere inference. It is actually our experience. When we wake up, we very clearly know that we were in a state in which we were not aware of anything. The very fact that we know that we were in such a state means we must have known our being in that state. That is, if supposing, as most people assume, a state is deep sleep is a state of devoid of consciousness. There's no it's a state of unconsciousness. If that were the case, we would have no our experience. What we would be experiencing is an unbroken succession of alternating states of waking and dream. We would not be aware of any gap between them because we have no awareness in that gap. But the fact is, we are aware of a gap. We're aware of a third state in which we're not aware of anything. In order to be aware, but we're not aware of anything, we must be aware. So what is absent in sleep is not awareness, it's any object of awareness, any content of awareness, whatever we want to call it. So sleep is a state of awareness. We recognize that when we wake up because the eye that shone alone in sleep is the same eye that is shining now. The difference is that now this eye is mixed and conflated with adjuncts. So we know ourselves as I am Melissa, I am Michael, I am whoever. Because of that, because we now have superimposed upon ourselves this false awareness of ourselves, it seems to us we didn't know anything in sleep. But we didn't know anything, but it seems that sleep seems to us to be a state of blankness. But if we think about it carefully, it's only a blankness from the perspective of ego in waking and dream. It's not, or let's say rather than blankness, let's say darkness. Generally people consider sleep to be a state of darkness. It's not a state of darkness, according to Bhagavan, it's a state of light. That is what shines in sleep is the light of pure awareness. it seems dark from our perspective as ego because we take knowledge or awareness to be knowledge or awareness of other things. So when we're suddenly deprived of any object of awareness, any content of awareness, it seems, oh, there was no awareness there at all. But that's a limited, that's only how it seems to be from the perspective of ego. What experienced its being in sleep is the pure awareness that we actually are. But that pure awareness is not something other than ego, it's the underlying reality of ego. So as ego, we're able to recognize a continuity, but we're not able to we cannot recall what we experienced in sleep, the pure awareness that we experienced in sleep, because we have now superimposed this false awareness. I am this body, I am this person, I am Melissa, I am Michael, whoever. We've superimposed this upon ourselves. So our ignorance in waking and dream prevents us recalling the pure awareness that alone shone in sleep.
Michael, thank you very much. As soon as you pointed out that it's a different kind of experience when in the non-dual, in the full non-dual abiding, it became immediately clear. But I appreciate the depth of your explanation because it gave me another way of understanding transitive and intransitive awareness. And I have no doubt, it's very clear that there is awareness in deep sleep. The only thing I was needing clarification about is where is the experience in deep sleep? And now you have clarified it is a different paradigm of experience altogether, in which there isn't knower and known and knowing. There is only the knowing.
Exactly.
Thank you so much.
Exactly.
Sadhu Shiva, come on in.
Yes, hello. Michael, first of all, let me say that the question is not from an argumentative standpoint. It is an absolute honor to have a forum to be able to think about and discuss these topics. But I do wonder if prarabdha karmas are allotted for an ego to become liberated in a lifetime, then what's to say that prarabdha karmas would not be allotted for a bodhisattva to exist? I sometimes wonder if Bhagavan himself was a bodhisattva, but didn't even know he was a bodhisattva. That's my question.
Okay. A bodhisattva may have prarabdha, but liberation has nothing to do with prarabdha. Prarabdha is the fruit of karma. Karma is finite, so the fruit of karma is finite. And as Bhagavan says, the fruit of karma passes away. When you experience the fruit of a karma, that fruit is finished. If you eat an apple, you can't eat it. Having eaten it once, you can't eat it again the next day because it's finished. So the fruit of karma is exactly like that. So finite actions have finite fruit. Liberation is infinite. Therefore, it cannot be the fruit of action. This is what Bhagavan, action actually will create only bondage. That's what Bhagavan says in the second verse of Upadesha Undiyar. But the fruit of action passing away, what remains is the seed. and the seed will cast one into that great ocean of action. Therefore, action will not give liberation. What he means by seed is the vasanas. That is, whatever actions we do, we are doing under the sway of our vasanas. The actions we do under the sway of our vasanas are the actions that bear fruit. Where our vasanas means our will. So whatever action we do under the sway of our will bear fruit. What fruit is appropriate for which action, that is known to God. God will take care of that. We need not be concerned about that. So the prarabdha is just a selection of the fruit of our past karmas. Because our karmas were finite, the fruit are finite. So liberation cannot be the fruit of any action. Therefore, it has got nothing to do with prarabdha. Prarabdha determines what we are given to experience. Given to experience in the sense of the phenomena that we are given to experience in this life. So liberation, as just discussing with Melissa, we can call it an experience, but it's not an experience like any other experience. The experience of prarabdha, what we're experiencing is something other than ourselves. Whereas the experience of liberation is the state in which we experience nothing other than ourselves. So prarabdha has nothing to do with liberation. So when the body is born, it undergoes a certain prarabdha. In some texts, it is said that when someone attains liberation, their agamya and sanchita come to an end, but the prarabdha remains. I'll just explain the terms. Agamya means the actions that we do under the sway of our vasanas. In other words, they're the actual actions. Everything else is just the fruit of the actions. The sanchita is the heap or pile of the fruits of past actions that we haven't yet experienced. From that sanchita, God selects a certain fruit in order adds prarabdha for us to experience in this lifetime. So it is said, but in some texts, it is said that for jnani, the agamya and sanchita is destroyed, but the prarabdha remains, and the prarabdha will come to an end only at the end of the body. Bhagavan's answer to that is, if a husband has 3 wives and he dies, all 3 wives become widows. You can't have one wife remaining unwidowed and the other 2 wives widowed. All become widows. Why Bhagavan uses that analogy? Because who is the doer of action and the experiencer of the fruit of the action? It is ego. Therefore, in the absence of ego, there is neither action nor the fruit of action. So all the 3 karmas are destroyed when we know ourselves. That's what Bhagavan says in verse 38 of Ulladu Napadu. If we are a doer of action, we will experience the resulting fruit. Investigating who is the doer of action when one knows oneself, that is, when we know ourselves by investigating who is the doer of action, doership will depart and all the 3 karmas will slip off. This is the state of liberation, which is eternal. So when he says doership will depart, why will doership depart? Because when we know ourselves, ego will be destroyed. Ego is the doer and the experiencership. So in the absence of ego, there can be neither doership nor experiencership. Bhagavan mentions only doership will depart, but the implication is that the experiencership will depart along with it. So all the 3 karmas will come to an end. So there is no prarabdha for the jnani. Why it is said there's a prarabdha for the jnani is because people take the jnani to be the body. And for the body, there seems to be a prarabdha. For Bhagavan attained the ego that was aware of itself as I am Venkataraman. That was destroyed at the age of when Bhagavan was 16. Well, the that is, when that ego was destroyed, then what remained shining through that person called Venkataraman, that is Bhagavan, which is our own reality. But that is what. So that body became like a vehicle through which Bhagavan gave us these teachings. So from the body, seemingly there's a prarabdha, but then Bhagavan doesn't take that body to be I. The Bhagavan isn't aware of himself as I am this body. So we need to distinguish the jnani from the body that he seems to be. Yes, he or she. I mean, it's got nothing to do with gender, because that the jnani is neither he nor she. Jnani is only I, nothing but I. So in our view, we see Bhagavan as a body, as a person. So for us, it seems that he undergoes a prarabdha and he gives us these teachings and everything, and we can put labels on him. He's a bodhisattva, he's an incarnation of God. We can, whatever labels we want, we can put on him. But what he actually is our own very being. He is that Satchidananda that is the reality of each and every one of us. So even to call him a bodhisattva or an incarnation of God or anything, it's all only from our perspective. From his perspective, he alone is. He is that infinite Satchit, infinite being awareness. Is that a clear answer?
Yes. And while you were speaking, it came to me that prior to coming to know self, it seems that a genuine and sincere, complete surrender and repentance would be, I don't know if necessary, but definitely advantageous along the way.
Yes, that is, in order to know ourselves as we actually are, we need to be willing to surrender ourselves completely. So when we rise as ego, we inevitably do actions. Some actions are good actions, some actions are bad actions. That's why we all experience a mixed prarabdha. Nobody experiences a life free of any suffering. Nobody experiences a life only suffering. Even if we experience the worst of worst prarabdhas, if we live in poverty and we're struggling all our life, there'll be little moments of joy we experience here and there. Some days we may go without food, but the day when we get food, there's nothing like this food. It'll be good, give us great satisfaction. So the nature of embodied existence is a mixture of pleasure and pain. And whatever pleasure we experience is the fruit of our good actions. Whatever pain we experience is the fruit of our bad actions. So we have all done good things and bad things. As we progress in this spiritual path, our mind becomes more and more pure. So we have less and less inclination to do the bad things. So generally, a person who is advanced on the spiritual path, we'll find that then it will be reflected in their nature. They'll be kind, considerate. Doesn't mean that we don't make mistakes. We all make mistakes sometimes. Sometimes, with the best will in the world, we will say something that will hurt someone or something we don't have any intention to, but it happens. So, yes, of course we should repent. If we've done any wrong, we should be repentant for it. But what is the best way of repenting? To not rise. That is, what is the root of all karma, all good action and bad action? The root of it is ego. Ego is the doer. So if we cease rising as ego, that is the greatest repentance. So complete surrender of ego. That means not rising as egos, subsiding and merging back into our being. That is the ultimate repentance. No other repentance is necessary. That is, to the extent to which we subside, we'll freely, if we make mistakes, yes, we'll freely accept it. There's a verse in Guru Vajrayana in which Bhagavan says, to err is human. Or I don't know if he says human, he says to err is inevitable. We all make mistakes. We all do wrong actions, say wrong things and everything. But we should never try. I can't remember exactly what he said there, but the idea is whenever we are, we should be freely ready to accept, yes, it was my mistake, I did wrong. So we should never try to cover up the wrongs we've done. I mean, what's the loss? We just accept, yes, okay, sorry, I made a mistake. That wasn't my intention, but I did that, and I take full responsibility for it. So repentance is natural to someone who is following the spiritual path. Because the more we as ego subside, the more we'll be willing to accept that we have done wrong and that we should accept responsibility for the wrong we've done, and we should apologize or repent for it or whatever.
Yes, so surrender to the process.
We can say surrender to the process, but ultimately what we are surrendering to is to being. By ceasing to rise, we are surrendering to being. Being is what we actually are. Rising is what we now seem to be. Rising is the nature of ego. Being is the nature of what we actually are, ourselves.
So be it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. Melissa, go ahead and read your question.
Okay. So this was a question based on the reading that our group did last week in the book that we're continuing to read, which is Talks with Ramana Maharshi. And we had read a dialogue in which Ramana referred with seeming approval to the tapas of Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi, regarding a fast which Gandhi was planning to begin that would last for many days. Our group had some discussion about that and had some varying opinions about what was the relationship between Ramana and Gandhi. So after the group was over, I asked AI to do a historical search about what is known historically about Ramana and Gandhi as a relationship. And it was clear that Ramana knew about Gandhi's work through newspapers that he read, and also because devotees would give updates when they came to visit. But Ramana was also reported to have confirmed on at least one occasion that Gandhi experienced a highly advanced, thought-free state of spiritual realization called nishtha. Likewise, Gandhi also knew about Ramana and had reportedly, this is I guess it's historical, had reportedly tried to visit Ramana on at least one occasion, but his driver, the driver of his car, was afraid that Gandhi would go, upon meeting Ramana, Gandhi would go into deep samadhi and would then give up the freedom fight. So he diverted Gandhi's car away from the ashram, although it had come as close as just a few miles from the ashram. And now I added as part of my question, perhaps it's noteworthy that India declared independence on August 15th, 1947. Soon thereafter, Gandhi was assassinated on January 30th, 1948. And then less than a year later, Ramana's body was initially found to have a tumor on the elbow in November of 1948 that subsequently led to the death of the body. And it seemed that the proximity and the order of these apparent events seemed to me to be more than coincidence. That when India achieved independence, a turning point was completed in the dream, of course. And it brought to mind for me Jesus saying on the cross, "It is done." So I'm just asking, could you tell us any more about this?
Right. Okay. Regarding what is recorded in talks, the passage is in section 533. That what is recorded there is soon after the announcement in the newspapers that Gandhiji was going to fast for 21 days at Yawada jail, two young men came to Sri Bhagavan. They were very excited. They said, "Mahatma is now fasting for 21 days. We want permission from Sri Bhagavan to run up to Yawada so that we also may fast as long as he does. Please permit us. We're in a haste to go." Saying so, they made ready to rush out. Bhagavan smiled and said, "It's a good sign that you have such feelings, but what can you do now? Get the strength which Gandhi has got by his tapasya, you will afterwards succeed." What Bhagavan is saying here is that these things, that is, Gandhi was going on hunger strike for a purpose. He was going on hunger strike at that time he was in jail, and he was because of his satyagraha, his peaceful resistance against the British rule. He was put in jail, and over some issue he was going on a hunger strike. When Gandhi went on hunger strike, a lot of young people, they also wanted to go on hunger strike because there was all that fervor at that time. People wanted to do whatever they could to get independence from the British. So Bhagavan appreciated the enthusiasm of those young people, but he pointed out that Gandhi is doing what he's doing because he's done a certain amount of tapas. He's made a lot of sacrifices for these things. He's able to go on fast for many days because by the sacrifices he's made, he's gained a certain strength, so he's able to do it. That's what he means by tapasya. It doesn't. We can give it we can attribute some spiritual meaning to it, but it's not so much a spiritual. Bhagavan is talking about he has that strength to be able to go on fast, and he's able to stand up against the British. And when Gandhi goes on fast, it has major repercussions because it's on all the newspapers, and it becomes very embarrassing for the British if they just allow Gandhi to starve himself to death. So it's a way of forcing them to do things. Gandhi had that strength to do that. If any other person had done it, we wouldn't have had the impact that Gandhi has done it. So that's what Bhagavan means by tapasya. He's because of the sacrifices he's been making in this freedom struggle, and because he's stuck by certain good principles. He's stuck by the principle of ahimsa, not causing harm, doing things he interpreted ahimsa as non-violence. That's not actually the meaning of ahimsa. Himsa means harm, ahimsa means non-harm. But it's a sort of loose interpretation of what is meant by ahimsa. But it's not. sometimes violence is necessary in certain circumstances, because sometimes to avert a greater harm, some violence may be necessary. So it's not the idea of ahimsa is it's not harming. But anyway, Gandhi took it as non-violence, and he stuck by that principle, and that gave him a certain strength. There were others in India at the time who wanted to rise up and rebel against the British, and by armed resistance to drive the British out of India. But Gandhi always insisted, no, we should do this by peaceful means. And Gandhi had a huge effect. And eventually the British left. There's a lot of debate among historians whether it's because of Gandhi's satyagraha, because of his peaceful resistance, or the circumstances under which the British eventually left after the Second World War, because there were a lot of Indians who were ready to rise up and fight against the British. And the British all their resources had gone into fighting the Second World War. They couldn't have managed, if there'd been an uprising in India, they couldn't have managed to put it down, because the army they had in India is probably 95% Indian. So if they all rise up, the British can't do anything. So they finally understood it's a hopeless case. So to what extent it was Gandhi's peaceful protesting, and to what extent it was those who were ready to rise up and fight against the British, nobody knows. But anyway, the British just understood they could no longer continue, and so they left. But what Bhagavan is appreciating there is that Gandhi stuck with certain principles, and so that gave him a certain strength, a certain power, and he had a certain impact. I think that's the point Bhagavan is making there. Regarding what the information you got from AI, it's the problem with information we get from AI gets most of its information from the internet, and there are many stories that go around that aren't entirely accurate about this thing about Ramana is reported to have confirmed on at least one occasion that Gandhi experienced a highly advanced, thought-free state of spiritual realization called Nishta. Again, I think actually this comes from talks, but it's not given as it's given in talks. There's some place where Bhagavan refers to some article in which Gandhi is quoted as saying that he's going to a certain place and that he's not thinking about it. He just, because Gandhi outwardly he was a politician, but inwardly he was a Rama Bhakta. He was a devotee of Rama. And so he was trying to combine spiritual practice with his politics. So he felt he was being guided by the higher power to do whatever he was doing. So when he was going to a certain place, he reported that when he was going there, he wasn't even thinking about it. His mind was just calm and peaceful. That is what Bhagavan refers to. I don't think this means it's a state of spiritual realization. It's just he because of because to the extent that he was able to, Gandhi was surrendered to Rama, and he was acting. He felt he was acting under the sway of Rama's will. So there was that to a certain extent, at least, Gandhi was in a surrendered state of mind. To what extent, God alone knows, and Bhagavan alone knows. We can't say. Regarding Nishta, Nishta simply means firmness or steadfastness. So it can be used in different contexts. When we talk about Atma-nishta is usually translated in English as self-abidance. But what it actually means is firmly being as one actually is. So it's that firmness, that steadfastness, that steadiness that is referred to by Nishta. But you can refer to Nishta in anything. Anything you're steadfast in can be described as Nishta. So even if the term Nishta was used, he's Nishta, he's got Nishta, he's got firmness in what he's doing. So I don't think we can take it, but Bhagavan is saying that Gandhi had attained a high state of spiritual realization. Of course, many people interpret things that Bhagavan said or things that Bhagavan is reported to have said. Everyone interprets in their own way. We don't know exactly what Bhagavan said. We don't know the exact circumstances. And what we hear is often comes along with a certain interpretation. When I first came to Ramanashram in very nearly 50 years ago, that was in 1976, at that time, there were many old devotees who had lived with Bhagavan for many, many years. And I found when talking to old devotees, sometimes I would hear a story from a certain devotee, and they'd tell it in a certain way. And afterwards, when I'm talking to another devotee, I would say, I heard this. And that devotee would say, no, it wasn't like that. I was there at the time, it was like this. So two people who were there at the same time, reporting the same incident, but they were completely different understanding of that incident. So it sounds almost like two complete different stories, though it's the same story. Everyone sees Bhagavan through their own limited view, their own color glasses. So it's very difficult for us to know at this distance what actually Bhagavan meant, particularly when talking about these sort of things. Fortunately for us, Bhagavan has written his teachings in his own writings in Ulladu Upadeshundiya, Nana, Arunachastuti Panchakam, and so on. So we know what Bhagavan's core teachings were from his own writings. But a lot of other things that are reported about what Bhagavan said, we can't really know. All we hear is how the interpretation of certain things from the people who saw these things. Because we all, when we see something, when we hear something, when we read news in the newspaper, we all interpret it in our own way. We all take it in our own way. So we can't take these, that is, stories about Bhagavan, we always have to take with a large pinch of salt, because it's different people's view of different things that happened. So it's very difficult for us to say what Bhagavan actually, what Bhagavan's view of Gandhi is, but generally Bhagavan had a good thing to say about everyone. Even a very bad person, Bhagavan will find some good to say about them. For example, there's an incident. There was one person in the town who he was known to be a rogue. I think he had several wives and he had many children, and he had been involved in various types of dubious business and everything. So generally he had a reputation for being a bit of a rogue. And towards the end of his life, his family turned against him, everyone abandoned him, and he passed away. When the news of his passing away came, some devotees deliberately mentioned to Bhagavan, because they thought, this is one person, Bhagavan cannot have anything good to say about this person. And when the news was reported to Bhagavan that he had passed away, he'd say, such a fine person. He said, Bhagavan said he would, even in his last days when he was so sick, he was always scrupulously clean. He would come here to Palitetam, the pond near Ramanashram. He would come there and he would wash his clothes, and they would always be spotlessly clean. So Bhagavan will find a good thing to say about anyone. That's just Bhagavan's nature. So it's very difficult for us to say, oh, Bhagavan. People often used to go to Bhagavan and say, because there's so many famous saints and people, or so-called saints, people who are considered to be different people who have followings and things. People used to ask Bhagavan, is such and such a person a jnani? Bhagavan, well, of course, the answer he gave depended on the circumstances, but one answer that Bhagavan often gave is, there is only one jnani. You are that. Know yourself, and you'll see everyone is jnani. There's nothing other than jnana. So it's very difficult for us to say, but Bhagavan had this opinion of such and such person or not. And I know with regard to Gandhi, different people have different opinions about Gandhi in India. When I was there, when I was first there 50 years ago, generally the general consensus about Gandhi, people had very high respect for him, and they considered him as the father of the nation. But over the last 50 years, the politics has changed. Now it's a different type of government. It's a more right-wing government, and it's influenced by this government is very much under the influence of an organization called the RSS, and it was a member of the RSS who assassinated Gandhi. So the present government doesn't have such a high view of Gandhi. So, and that of course affects people. So this is the nature of fame in this world. Some people appreciate, some people won't appreciate. So even in Gandhi's time, different people had different opinions about him. So when people report of what Bhagavan said about Gandhi, many of them, I heard one remark, but I take it with a huge pinch of salt. It may have been true, it may not be true, I don't know. But one thing that is reported, but when news of Gandhi's assassination came, Bhagavan said what to do. He wounded the hearts of Hindus. I'm not saying that is what Bhagavan said. That is what I heard reported by some people. But it could be that those people, that could be people putting words in Bhagavan's mouth because that's their view. So I think we have to be very, very cautious when we hear any story about what Bhagavan said about anyone. That people often have their own agendas, and they put words into Bhagavan's mouth that suits their agenda, or they interpret things according to their agenda. So I think we have to be very cautious about that. The other thing regarding Gandhi coming to Bhagavan, he didn't come within several miles of Ramanashram. He actually passed in front of the gate of Ramanashram. The story is, that is, Gandhi traveled all over India because he had supporters all over India, and he was raising. He traveled around and gave talks and to get support for the freedom struggle, which he was one of the prominent leaders of. For some people, he was the leader of the freedom struggle. Other people have other views, and they think he was just one of the leaders. But anyway, he was definitely, for most people, he was the most prominent leader of the freedom movement. So at one time, he was on a tour of South India, and he was giving talks and so on, and meeting all the local Congress groups and things. So the main leader of the Congress in South India, particularly in what is now Tamil Nadu, or what was in those days the Madras presidency, was a person called Rajagopalachari. He's popularly known as Rajaji. He later succeeded Mountbatten as Governor General of India. He was the last Governor General of India before the Indian Constitution was written, and then India became a republic. And that is, as Governor General, that is for a few years after independence, it was still the status of India was a bit like Canada or Australia. It's still the head of state was still the British monarch, and so there was the Governor General representative of the British monarch. So even now in Australia or Canada, they have a Governor General who is the representative of the British monarch, who is also the monarch of Australia and Canada and other places. So for a short time, India was like that. So the first governor, the last viceroy of India, of British India, was Mountbatten. He became the first Governor General of independent India, and then Rajaji became Governor General. And then they have a constitution, and they from then on it was no longer they no longer had Governor General. They had their own president, and the first president was Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan. So Rajaji was a contemporary of Bhagavan, probably about the same age as Bhagavan. I don't know. He may have been a bit younger or a bit older, probably maybe a bit younger. But anyway, for some reason, he didn't like Bhagavan. What the reason is, we don't know. I mean, it could be partly that he's a Iyengar, he's a Vaishnava. And Bhagavan is Shaiva, so maybe he didn't like Advaita philosophy, maybe. We don't know. But anyway, for some reason, he didn't like Bhagavan. So apparently one day when someone had returned from Ramanashram to Gandhi, because whenever the close followers of Gandhi, when Gandhi saw that they were really tired of what they were doing and they needed to recuperate, he would often tell them, go to and spend time in Ramanashram. So at one time when one of his close followers returned from Ramanashram, Gandhi asked him, how is Bhagavan Raman? He was asking with all respect. And Rajaji, who was sitting nearby, remarked, as he often remarked, oh, what is the use of just sitting in a cave doing nothing when Gandhiji and others are struggling for freedom? Some remarks like that he made. And Gandhi turned around and put his hand in his mouth, meaning keep quiet. So the attitude of Rajaji was quite well known. But anyway, as I say, Rajaji was arranging this tour of South India. And one of the places they were to visit was Ramanashram. And the place where Gandhi was to give a speech was what was in those days the cattle fair ground, which later became a compound of the Government Arts College. But in those days, it was still the cattle ground. That is very close to Ramanashram. So Gandhi was given a certain time, but he had 20 minutes or half an hour to make his speech. So he deliberately cut his speech short because he wanted to have the opportunity to visit Bhagavan. But Rajaji somehow delayed things and kept him talking and everything. And when he said, let us go now to Ramanashram, Rajaji said, no, there's no time. We've got the next appointment. So the car, which was carrying Gandhiji and Rajaji, passed in front of the gate of Ramanashram. And as he passed in front, there were some of the people from the ashram office and other people in the ashram, they were expecting Gandhi to come. So they were waiting at the gate and they saw Gandhi driving past doing like this, that is with folded hands, as he passed the entrance of Ramanashram. So he came so close, but it wasn't to be. I mean, when we tell the story, it's usually told that Rajaji was the obstacle. But obviously, Rajaji can't do that unless it's the divine will. It just was the divine will that Gandhi shouldn't meet Bhagavan. And many people say that if Gandhi had come to Bhagavan, because he was a sincere devotee, and we can say, I mean, from our point of view, we can say he was a mature spiritual aspirant, but maybe meeting Bhagavan would have completely transformed him and he'd have given up everything. That's a theory many people have. who knows? But it wasn't to be. So that's what happened.
Thank you, Michael. That was
Yeah.
a very interesting story.
Yeah.
The question wasn't a deep spiritual question, but it
Yeah,
was.
it's of
It
some
was
historical
yes,
interest and everything. Yeah.
yes. So thank you.
And one other thing that is quite well known, Bhagavan did say, once I think Rajendra Prasad was one of the close followers of Gandhi. Once when Gandhi had sent him to Ramanashram, and he'd spent a few days in Ramanashram, when he was leaving, he was taking leave of Bhagavan. He said, Bhagavan, I'm returning to Gandhi. Do you have any message for him? And Bhagavan said, when heart speaks to heart, what is the need of spoken words? Which is a
Yes.
very beautiful. That is that's so typically Bhagavan. People can interpret it in whatever way they like, but that was a very nice thing that Bhagavan said.
Yes, it's beautiful. Thank you.
Okay, David, come in.
Yeah.
David, come in with your question.
Yeah, real quickly, Michael, could you speak briefly about Bhagavan's appreciation relationship with Tagore? I had met his secretary, and when I was at school, and there were a couple of us who just listened to his stories for a couple of days, and they were inspiring. But if you have a comment or two, it would be appreciated, I think, maybe by all of us.
I don't know much. I think I seem to remember in one of Devaraja Mudliar's books, not in Day by Day, but in Devaraja Mudliar's Reminiscences, he mentioned something about a poem of Tagore. Tagore wrote his poems in Bengali, but he also translated many of them into English. So there is some connection, some verse of Tagore. I think it was quoted to Bhagavan, and Bhagavan said something appreciating about it. It was, if I've got a very vague memory about it, but my memory is it was something to do with how flowers blossom and everything, how nature's everything in nature, how it's all developing under the how the divine power lets nature flourish and pass away or something. I don't know what it is. And this was some parallel between this and the blossoming of the soul. Something like that. I can't. It's a very vague memory I've got. It's a long time since I've read that book.
That's nice to hear.
And Bhagavan said something appreciatively about that.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I remember hearing about what the Bhagavan said about Tagore. Well, he didn't even say it. He just appreciated the idea in the verse.
Yeah. Thank you.
Can I
Sure.
ask?
Come on
Hey,
in.
thank you, sir. One comment and one question. Michael, I see Bhagavan in Bhagavan's last day when he was dying.
Yeah.
There is a photo of Mahatma Gandhi behind his bed. I've seen that in the pictures. I wasn't there.
Yeah, that is, I think, when that is. In those days, the Kada movement was a very big movement. This is something that Gandhi had started because part of that is under British rule, the cotton that was grown in India was all sent to the cotton mills in Lancashire and Manchester and all these places. The cotton was spun and woven there and was re-exported back to India and sold in India at a higher price. So Gandhi started the Kada movement. Kada means often you see pictures of Gandhi with a spinning wheel. So Kada is homespun cotton. They spin it and they make it into a cloth, which is actually, it's a very nice cotton cloth. I don't know if they still have them, but 50 years ago when I was first in India, every town would have a kada shop where they'd be selling kada. So in those days, many people would weave kada. And the kopins Bhagavan wore, that is the loincloth Bhagavan wore, was always kada material. And sometimes he'd have a white towel over his shoulder. That would also be kada. And sometimes people, when they weave the kada cloth, they'll weave it with pictures. So there was someone had presented Bhagavan a cloth that had been made, a woven cloth that had an image of Gandhi on it. So that was spread over the pillow, and Bhagavan is lying there. So you see Bhagavan lying there, and Gandhi just behind him. It's a nice, it's a nice picture.
Very beautiful.
Yeah.
Michael, I have just one quick question that you have told us many times that ordainer has decided what's going to happen to us. And Bhagavan has said that the best course is to stay still. So practical question, as you're working day by day, I have to make, in working, what should be our attitude? Because we're supposed to not be the doer and not be the enjoyer. What should be our attitude to stay close to this path of surrender? How should we work with what attitude? What is conducive to our practice?
Okay, but what is the essence of Bhagavan's teachings? The essence of Bhagavan's teachings is holding on to self-attentiveness. There is a sentence in the 11th paragraph of Nana in which Bhagavan says, Oruvan tan sarupam deyam varayil nirantara sarupa smaranaye kai patravanayin adu andre podam. That means until one attains Swarupa, Swarupa means what we actually are, until one attains Swarupa, if one holds on to unbroken, uninterrupted Swarupa Smarana, that alone is sufficient. Swarupa Smarana we can translate as self-remembrance. Smarana means remembrance. But Swarupa means what we actually are. So remembering our own being, if we hold on to that, that alone is sufficient. That is really the essence of Bhagavan's teachings. Bhagavan always emphasized it's not, but Bhagavan never recommended separate time, setting aside time for meditation. Of course, Bhagavan wouldn't, if people like to do that, that's fine. But what he emphasized is we should try to hold on to self-attentiveness all the time, throughout the day. And the more we hold on to self-attentiveness, or let's say it this way, to the extent to which we are self-attentive, we as ego thereby subside. So if we hold on to that self-attentiveness, we will always be in a subsided condition. That is what Bhagavan meant in the final sentence of the note he wrote for his mother, when he said, therefore, Ahalin monamai irke nandru. Therefore, being silent is good. What he means by being silent is being without rising as ego. So if we hold on to that self-remembrance, to the extent to which we hold on to self-remembrance, to that extent we subside, and to that extent are we being in our natural state of silent being. So that is the key. If you hold on to the self-remembrance, everything else is taken care of. That's why Bhagavan says, Adu andre podam, that alone is sufficient. Nothing more is necessary. We just need to try to hold on to that self-remembrance, that self-attentiveness.
Thank you, Michael. Beautiful.
That is self-investigation. That is self-surrender.
And that is helped by love for Bhagavan. the devotion.
Love is the key. Love is the key. Bhagavan said that bhakti is the mother of jnana. Without love, we're not even going to try to be self-attentive, because the nature of the mind is to go outwards after so many other things. So there'll be no inclination even to be self-attentive unless we have that is the extent of the inclination that we have to hold on to self-attentiveness, to hold on to our being. That is the measure of our true love for Bhagavan. Otherwise, if we don't have love to hold on to that, we may love the external form of Bhagavan. We may love Bhagavan as the person whom he seemed to be. We may love him as God, but we are not loving him as he actually is. If we really love him as he actually is, he is that Swarupa that is ever shining in our heart as our fundamental awareness, I am. So if we love him, we will hold on to that remembrance of him. So love is absolutely the key. That's why Bhagavan said, bhakti is the mother of jnana. This idea that bhakti is one path, jnana is another path, Bhagavan has completely demolished that. If we understand Bhagavan's teachings, bhakti and jnana are inseparable.
Very beautiful, Michael. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Nathan, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Hello, Michael. You're like a celebrity to me. So I'm really excited
I'm no
to
celebrity.
be in
I'm
front
just,
of you.
I'm just,
I have to tell
by
you, I'm
Bhagavan's grace,
so,
I have love for him. That's all. Nothing more than that.
and it is love for him that you show up, in our
Yeah.
lives. So I really appreciate that. Yesterday I was at my daughter's sorry, I'm a little bit nervous here. I was at my daughter's birthday party, and this Indian lady was there too. I didn't know her. It was the grandmother of one of my daughter's friends. Anyway, I saw that they were Indian, so I was like, I gotta ask about Arunachala and all that. When can
Yeah.
I visit? So of course they were shocked. They're like, you believe in Ramana Maharshi, you're a disciple? What do you mean? But the grandmother said, I didn't want to come to this party, but God told me I needed to come. Um, because somebody needs to ask me something. Excuse me. God, I get emotional about these things.
Yeah.
But anyways, so this whole thing, we went through this Andre Podum. In fact, my daughter herself, every time I say Adu Andre, she ends up with Podum. Somehow I thought this line, when you first said it in some video, that it must be really important. I don't know why, because obviously I don't speak Tamil or anything like that. I'm of Persian origin, but I'm here in the US. And I wanted to get a little bit deeper into this because you mentioned um, when it comes to thoughts, you said that Bhagwan said thoughts are not just like the words, the thoughts, but it be the feelings. It's any kind of is it manifestation or anything that comes into your mind basically is a thought.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking many times when I try to do the self abiding. I'm only thinking about thoughts, but a lot of times these feelings in my body, like, oh, I feel my back is hurting, this and that, it's like something that's bringing me down. Are those also things that I would then reflect back on and be like, well, whose body is it hurting, and go into self-abiding at that moment? Because I see that seems to work, but I want to
Yeah.
make
Yeah.
sure I'm not just
Okay, yeah.
deluded.
Regarding thoughts, when Bhagavan talks about thought, he's using it in a very broad sense. So all types of mental phenomena or mental impressions are thoughts. That's why he says the whole world is nothing but thoughts. Because what is the world? It's nothing but a series of mental impressions. So the body is also just a thought. It's all just thought. Everything other than our being is a thought. Even ego, the knower of all other things, is a thought. So all phenomena are thoughts in the sense in which Bhagavan uses the term thought. Whatever appears, whether it is external, the seemingly external world, the perceptions or the sensations in the body, these are all things known by whom? By me. So Bhagavan has given us a very, very valuable clue in the form of a simple question, to whom? Whatever may appear, to whom does it appear? That is a clue, but whatever appears, we shouldn't be concerned about what appears, but we should be concerned about ourselves, the one to whom it appears. So we should turn our attention away from whatever appears, back towards ourselves, the one to whom it appears. That's what he means when he says, however many thoughts arise, so what? As and when each thought arises, it is necessary to investigate to whom it rises. That means we need to turn our attention away from whatever appears, back towards ourselves, the one to whom it appears.
Thank you.
There can't be any experience without an experiencer. So rather than attending to what is experienced, we need to try to attend to the experiencer, ourself.
And that's a different quality than you would definitely know when you're experiencing that. I mean, attending to that versus experiencing. It's a different quality.
It's a different quality because it's...
Because sometimes you get confused thinking that...
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No. Please say. You were saying.
No, I was exactly saying what you were saying. My kid was in front of me. I forgot what I was going to say. Yeah, no, I was saying this quality of knowing one's, I don't know if I'm using the right word. This quality of self-abiding is definitely a different thing than just understanding something with your mind.
Yes.
It feels different. And that's what I've experienced. And I'm like, I hope this is, I mean, I don't want to use my mind too much because it just, as soon as I get into the mind, of course, that quality disappears. So
yeah, but we... that is now we experience ourselves as this mind, so we use this mind. Thinking carefully about these things is helpful in order to, that is, we need to understand these things clearly. When Bhagavan says, fix your mind on yourself, what does that mean? We need to think carefully about it in order to recognize what he's talking about. So when you say it has a different quality, yes, because attending to anything other than ourselves, it's attending to an object. But attending to ourselves, we are not an object. We're not one object among many. We are the knower of all objects. So attending to the knower, attending to ourselves, is a far more subtle attention. But we need to think about it carefully because people often get perplexed when they're asked to attend to themselves because we're so used to attending to objects. When we're asked to attend to the subject, it's for many of us, it's very difficult to grasp what is meant. So we need to think carefully about this. What does Bhagavan mean when he says attend to the subject, attend to the first person, attend to I? It's not attending to any object. It's attending to, well, if we think about it, whatever else we are aware of, the one thing that we are always aware of is our own being. I am aware of this. I see this. I hear this. What is that? What is that I? Who am I? There's something in us that has that power of knowing all these things. What is that? It's something that, to use the terms Bhagavan uses, it's shining. Shining means it makes itself known to itself. It is Swayam Prakasha, self-shining. How do we know our being? We know our being just by being our being, because our being is awareness. And just by being that awareness, we are knowing that awareness. So we are drawing our attention away from all phenomena of all kinds. Anything that appears and disappears is something other than ourselves. We are trying to turn our attention back to that awareness to which all these things appear. And that awareness is ourself. We are that awareness. So all these things appear to whom? To me. We turn our attention back.
Wonderful. As you speak to us right now, are you yourself in self-abiding? Are you able to be in self-abiding and answer our question?
Uh, well, we should always, I try, but the nature of the mind, it's always, that is, if we put this into practice, it becomes very clear. But actually, the last thing we want to do is to attend to our own being. We will attend to anything. If we've got a pain, we prefer to attend to the pain than to attend to our being, because attending to our being is, we are literally putting our head on the chopping block. We are taking a step over the edge of a cliff. It's suicide. We not suicide. No, we're not killing the body. We're killing the I that is aware of itself as I am this body. So, in order to survive as ego, we are constantly trying to hold on to something other than ourselves. That's what Bhagavan refers to as urupatri, grasping form. Form means any type of phenomenon. We're constantly grasping things other than ourselves because we depend upon that for our very survival. So until we are willing to surrender completely, our mind will always be trying to grasp something else. So it's constant effort. Is in order to hold on to self-attentiveness, it requires constant effort. So it's only with it takes a great deal of practice to slowly gain the skill to hold on to at least a tenuous current of self-attentiveness, a very subtle self-attentiveness. To hold on to that in the heart takes a lot of practice. As Krishna says in the Gita, when Arjuna says to Krishna in chapter 6 of the Gita, that it's easier to control the wind than to control this mind. Krishna says, yes, it is difficult, but it is possible by abhyasa and vairagya. Abhyasa means practice. The practice he's talking about is the practice he's been talking about in the earlier verses of that chapter, keeping the mind fixed on oneself. That is what we are to practice. And to practice that, we need vairagya. We need to be willing to let go of other things. So that's why Bhagavan made it very, very clear. Sometimes Bhagavan said, subduing the mind is not your birthright. You have to work for it. We have to, it's only with patient and persistent practice that we can gain the skill or the love to hold on to that self-attentiveness uninterruptedly. So we're all at the stage of practice. We just have to keep on practicing until finally we merge forever back into our being. And the practice we need to do is the same from beginning to end, holding on to that self-remembrance, that self-attentiveness. It's such a simple thing Bhagavan has asked us to do. It's not difficult, but it requires all-consuming love. All-consuming means literally all-consuming. We must have
Because
so
your
much
instinct
love it
comes in
consumes
so
all
strongly
our
that
other desires.
you need to survive, no?
Well, yeah, we don't need to
I was
survive.
saying that
True
you're
survival is giving up ego, but as ego, we want to
right.
survive, so we hold on to other things.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate it.
Right. Thank
Okay, Melissa, did you have a comment you want to make? We're
Just,
almost out of
yes,
time
just,
here, so it
yes.
would be good to bring your question in.
Right. It's not really a question. I think this last dialogue is really a perfect place to conclude for today. But I just wanted to make a small remark that one of the ways that I try to abide or hold to the self-shining, the awareness that is being, the being that is awareness, is in any particular moment to ask myself, am I aware right now? And then I watch where I go to answer that question.
you. Yes.
And an interesting thing happens. It's as if there is a split second of just blank. Everything disappears for only a split second. But I've gotten gradually kind of attuned to noticing there is that split second when all of the objects disappear.
And that split second is a split second of clarity. That
Yes.
clarity is what we need to hold on to.
Yes.
But one
Yes,
thing that is clearer than any other thing is our own being.
Yes.
It is
Yes.
our being is ever self-shining. So we need to hold on to that clarity and lose
Yeah.
ourselves in that clarity.
Yeah. Yes, it's quite remarkable. It's quite amazing. It's quite wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.